All right, good afternoon. And I will start with my usual friendly reminder to please mute your microphones and make sure you're sending out both video and audio if you want to speak. Otherwise, the system will not be able to handle it. Today, as you all know, is International Mother Earth Day. In his message, the Secretary General says that all eyes are on the COVID-19 pandemic, and we must work together to save lives, ease suffering, and lessen the shattering economic and social consequences. But he also said that we must remember another emergency, the planet's unfolding environmental crisis. Greenhouse gases, just like viruses, do not respect national borders, he says, adding that we need to turn the recovery from the pandemic into a real opportunity to do things right for the future. The Secretary General has proposed 6 climate-related actions to shape this recovery. These include delivering new green jobs, funding sustainable sectors, and incorporating climate risks into the financial system and policy making. That message has been shared with you already. And the World Meteorological Organization today released a report which says that while COVID-19 may result in a temporary reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, it is not a substitute for sustained climate action. In fact, the pandemic will make it more difficult to tackle weather, climate, and water-related hazards, which are becoming more acute because of climate change. The report warns that we need to flatten both the pandemic and the climate curves and stresses the importance of post-COVID-19 stimulus packages that help the economy grow back greener. You can find the full report online. Staying on the same topic, the UN Environment Programme, in partnership with TED-Ed, today launched an online Earth School, which provides free educational content to help students, parents, and teachers around the world who are currently at home. Built for children and youth from age 5 to 18, it spans 30 school days that run between Earth Day and World Environment Day, which is on June 5th. The content features videos, reading materials, and activities, which will be translated into 10 languages. This will also help students gain an understanding of the environment while considering their role within it. The UN Environment Programme will also be exploring how this content can be adapted and shared with children who are not able to access the internet. Now, I want to highlight some UN activities on the ground around the world focusing on the pandemic. In Papua New Guinea, there are 7 confirmed cases of the virus, and there the UN resident coordinator, Gianluca Rampolla, has mobilized the humanitarian country team to assist with the National Health Preparedness and Response Plan. The UN team is also helping the government in areas including water, sanitation, social protection, education, food security, supply and logistics, as well as information management and risk communication. The UN on the ground quickly brought in development partners such as the World Bank and the European Union, together with donor governments like Australia, India, Japan, New Zealand, and the United States, as well as local authorities, to all work together to fund essential equipment to fight the disease. 1 million sets of personal protective equipment, as well as ventilators, ambulances, and tents are being procured. The UN team is also helping to set up isolation and quarantine wards and pre-triage facilities for the whole of Papua New Guinea. We're also closely coordinating with the government, the World Bank, and the Asian Development Bank to carry out a socioeconomic impact assessment to identify priority needs to save livelihoods and lift the economy. And in South Sudan, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that the already dire food security situation there could worsen due to the pandemic. Markets are under significant stress, as evidenced by sharp price increases. For example, the price of a 50-kilogram bag of maize increased by 36% in March alone. The removal of non-essential staff from the workforce and the closure of non-essential businesses, coupled with lingering impact on the devastating 2019 desert flooding, as well as desert locust invasion and rapidly rising food prices, will likely increase food insecurity and humanitarian needs. Prior to the pandemic, 6.5 million people, and that's 55% of the population, were already expected to face severe food insecurity at the height of the May to July annual hunger season. Humanitarian partners have been adapting their responses to deliver safely and responsibly and effectively in this pandemic environment. And in Sudan, in Darfur, where the UN mission continues to support the government of Sudan to combat the pandemic, the head of the mission, Jeremiah Mababolo, has donated 5 all-terrain vehicles, 4 high-capacity power generators, and a refrigerator container to the Federal Ministry of Health. At a virtual handover ceremony in Khartoum, Mr. Mababolo reiterated his call on all parties to the Sudan conflict to see reasons to join the peace process in Juba for a comprehensive agreement that would foster genuine and speedy nation building. And in Mozambique, the International Organization for Migration expressed concern about the potential spread of COVID-19 in the country. The reason is the return of Mozambican migrants from South Africa. The UN Migration Agency noted that according to Mozambique's National Migration Service, over 14,000 Mozambican migrants returned from the neighboring country within a span of a few days, as South Africa declared a lockdown due to the virus. And back here in New York this morning, the Special Envoy for the Great Lakes, Huang Xia, told Security Council members that with a growing number of COVID-19 cases, the countries of the region are facing significant challenges. On the economic front, the measures taken to address the pandemic, combined with the reallocation of resources to address the health crisis, are likely to weaken already fragile economies. This, the Special Envoy said, could have implications for peace, security, and development. He welcomed the debt moratorium announced by the G20 and called for support from the international community to help Great Lakes countries deal with and recover from the pandemic. And turning to the implementation of the Peace, Security, and Cooperation Framework for the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the Special Envoy said there is still a sense of optimism. However, he added, the greatest challenges undoubtedly remains the activities by armed groups, including the illicit exploitation of natural resources. Insecurity caused by armed groups, especially in the eastern part of the country, also, of course, fuels the humanitarian crisis. His remarks have been shared with you. And the Director General of the UN Food and Agriculture Organization spoke yesterday, with agricultural ministers of the G20 on behalf of the UN food agencies. Kyu Dong-hyu warned that the COVID-19 pandemic is not only a major public health concern, but also a threat to global food security. This threat can be mitigated by avoiding measures that disrupt food supply chains. He urged G20 ministers to include long-term goals in their policy frameworks. He said that the crisis opens an opportunity to accelerate food system transformation and cited e-commerce tools as a way to enhance local resilience and bolster direct links between producers and consumers. And the UN Office of Drugs and Crime in Vienna today released a new research on pangolins, which, despite an international trade ban, are the most trafficked mammals in the world. The research shows that between 2014 and 2018, the equivalent of 370,000 pangolins were seized globally, suggesting that millions have been trafficked and killed. As you know, the COVID-19 outbreak has been linked to coronavirus originating in wild bats that jump to people via an intermediary animal. Pangolins are among the leading suspects. The executive director of the UNODC, Khada Wali, said that for the sake of preserving biodiversity and preventing the next public health emergency, the illegal wildlife trade must stop. The research from UNODC will be included in their World Wildlife Crime Report, which is expected to be published in June. And you will have seen a statement we put out yesterday afternoon that the Secretary General strongly condemned an attack earlier this week in Myanmar's Rakhine State on a WHO vehicle transporting COVID-19 surveillance samples. That attack resulted in the death of a WHO colleague and serious injury to a government official. The Secretary General calls for a full and transparent investigation into the incident and for the perpetrators to be brought to justice. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, today condemned the second execution of a child offender in the space of just 4 days by authorities in Iran. Shayan Saidipur is reported to have been executed in prison in the Kurdistan province of Iran on Tuesday. He had been sentenced to death for a crime allegedly committed when he was under 18. The execution followed a judicial process that appears to have been deeply flawed, according to Ms. Bachelet. This came after another person, Majid Ismailazadeh, was reportedly executed in Ardabil province on Saturday. This also follows a conviction on charge of murder allegedly committed when he was under 18. The execution of these two child offenders are absolutely prohibited under international human rights law, Ms. Bachelet said. She repeated her call on Iranian authorities to honor its international human rights obligations, immediately halt all executions of juvenile offenders, and commute all such death penalty sentences. The Secretary General supports the High Commissioner's views and reiterates his opposition to the death penalty, particularly in the cases involving child offenders. And turning to Yemen, heavy rains have caused more flooding over the last 24 hours. The government yesterday declared Aden a disaster zone. Our humanitarian colleagues have received reports that more than 14,700 people have been displaced across 21 sites for internally displaced people in Aden. The UN agencies and our humanitarian partners are working with government officials to assess needs and will provide relief based on these assessments. Heavy rains were also reported in Raima, in Taiz, and Ib provinces over the past 24 hours, and UN agencies are working with local authorities to assess the needs in these areas. For the second day in a row, I can end with good news. Thanks to a full payment from Cambodia, 85 member states have now paid in full for 2020. And thank you to our friends in Phnom Penh. Let's now go to our questions. If I could put on my glasses. James, why don't you go ahead? James Bays. All right, James, can you hear me? I can't hear you. All right, let's try Evelyn. Evelyn? All right. Hello, James?
James or me?
Yes, Steph, can you hear me now?
All right, okay, perfect. Let's go with James and then Evelyn.
Steph, I have 3 questions for you, if I may. I can do them one by one.
Yeah,
First, the US Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, has said the decision to annex the West Bank will be an Israeli decision alone. Many are interpreting that as a green light to the new coalition to annex the West Bank. How worried is the Secretary General about that prospect?
Look, I'm not in the analysis business, but what I can tell you is that we have in the past both the Secretary General and his envoy, Mr. Mladenov, have expressed great concern about possible annexation and unilateral moves, and that remains our position. And I do expect Mr. Mladenov to take this to say more on this at his briefing this week in the Security Council. Your second question, James.
Second question, you're probably aware there is a new draft by Tunisia and France for a resolution to do with COVID-19 and the call from the Secretary General for a ceasefire. We've asked you this before, but how important that the Security Council come with a united voice on this?
So it's very important that the Security Council speak with one voice on the current crisis that is gripping the whole world. Obviously, it will be up to Council members to decide what's in the text and to adopt a text. But I think we would greatly appreciate a strong voice from the Security Council. And your third question, while you're at it.
My third question is about the Security Council, the way it's operating. How happy is the UN with the technology that it's providing to the Security Council? If UN Security Council members can't hear each other, how are they supposed to speak to the world?
Look, I was not aware that there'd been issues. We are all, I think, we are all trying our best to accommodate the Security Council and all member states, and we will continue to work through whatever technical hitches there may have been. The system is really is adapting. It is improving on a daily basis, and we will continue to work in that direction. Evelyn.
The U.S. says Iran launched a military satellite, and President Trump then said he told the Navy to shoot down and destroy any Iranian fast boats that may harass U.S. naval ships. Do you have any more information on this, and how worried would the SG be of this seeming escalation?
Well, I mean, we've always called Secretary General, I think, has used one of his favorite expressions for that region, which is nerves of steel, and always called for all parties involved to avoid any sort of escalation.
Thank you.
Hold on a second. Benno, go ahead.
Thank you, Steph. Thank you, dear colleagues. Today, in 5 months, the high-level week is scheduled to begin. When will you call it off due to COVID-19?
We are looking now, obviously, first at events that will take place in June. Whatever decision is taken by whatever decision is made on the high-level week will be a decision taken by member states with the support of the Secretariat.
Can I just add? Can you imagine a normal high-level week this year in any circumstances?
Look, I think what we can imagine or not imagine about anything is. I mean, we now have to imagine the unimaginable, and I think that's what we're all doing in our everyday lives, in the way we work, in the way people are suffering all around the world. So we just have to take it one day at a time, and I think as often people say, it really will be the virus that will dictate the decision, the direction in which we take. Before we go on, I failed to read one note that I had, which was on Cameroon. And I want to say that we welcomed the conclusion of the investigations by the Cameroonian authorities into the horrific killing of civilians in the village of Nagarbu in northwest region of Cameroon on February 14th. We also welcome the decision of the government to proceed with the arrest and prosecution of the alleged perpetrators, as well as the offer of reparation to the victims. We reiterate the Secretary General's appeal of February 17th to armed actors to refrain from attacks against civilians and respect human rights. We also underscore the urgency of the Secretary General's call for an immediate global ceasefire in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, and we acknowledge the commitment of the President of Cameroon to resolve the conflict in the northwest and southwest regions through peaceful means, as indicated in a communiqué of the government dated April 21st. All right, with that out of the way, I'll go back to your questions. Edie.
Thank you very much, Steph. I was also going to ask about Iran, but I'm also going to ask about North Korea. Have you had any update at all from the UN people in Pyongyang about the state of Kim Jong-un's health? And I would like to reinforce what James said about the technology. I don't know if anybody else was trying to listen to the Security Council on web TV this morning, but it was basically unintelligible because the voices were playing over each other. The person's voice was being repeated.
Let me try to find out, and I will get back to you. What was your question on Iran?
No, my question was basically what the Secretary General's reaction was to the Iranian satellite and the U.S. reaction, which
I didn't hear Evelyn ask about the satellite. What I can tell you about the satellite is that we've obviously taken note of the announcement by Iran of the launch of a space launch vehicle that took place on the 22nd. Today, it's up to the Security Council to interpret whether or not it's a violation of Resolution 2231. The Council is there to interpret its own resolutions and to determine how this particular launch of a satellite vehicle relates to the resolution. The Secretariat stands ready to assist the Security Council in carrying out its tasks in relation to the implementation of Resolution 2231. Abdelhamid.
Wait, on North Korea.
Oh, North Korea. No, we have no special insight on the situation the situation regarding Kim Jong-un. Abdelhamid.
Thank you, Stephane. The Libyan Interior Minister just announced that the Russian mercenary company Wagner has used nerve gas southeast Tripoli. Can you confirm that? And if not, can you verify it with UNSMI?
We will ask. I had not seen this the report, but we will ask. I have a second.
Yeah. I have a second question regarding Palestine also. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is unusual development. I mean, a coalition government formed in Israel based on an agreement of a land grab from Palestine, which could equal 1/4 of the West Bank if the Jordan Valley is included. Why the Secretary General does not issue a clear statement condemning this development? This is not an easy, it's not a daily incident.
Abdelhamid, two things. One, on the formation of the government, it went through a political process, democratic process, which is not for us to comment how member states form their government. On the issue of annexation, we have been very clear. If you look back at the Secretary General's briefings and Mr. Mladenov's briefings on this issue, it had been clear in black and white, and those positions, those statements still stand.
Go ahead. Russian Federation issued a statement. Even the U.S. Secretary of State commented on that, but not the Secretary General.
As I've said, I think a couple of times today and yesterday, Mr. Mladenov will be briefing the Security Council this week, and I think he will be very clear in his statement. I have a question from Luisa at CNN Brazil. What is the Secretary General's comment on President Bolsonaro's joining a rally to end quarantine measures and cheering on protesters who called on the military to shut down Congress and the Supreme Court? And I think that took place this Sunday. Look, what I will say is that for the Secretary General, this is an issue, a basic principle position. We've always emphasized the importance of listening to scientists, to the World Health Organization, to guide public policy on social distancing, on reopening, on anything having to do with the virus. And on this matter, we adhere and we encourage governments around the world to follow the guidelines given by the World Health Organization. Alan from RIA Novosti, I think you have a question.
Yeah, can you hear me, Stephane?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Secretary Pompeo said that China still has not shared the virus samples with the outer world. Can you please elaborate on whether the WHO got these samples or not?
I think that's a question for WHO. We're not. I have no specific information from them on their technical cooperation they have with their member states. So that's an issue to check with WHO. Martin Wang asked, we're concerned about the safety of our UN staff. Can you give us an update on the latest confirmed cases? Yes, I can. And this is as of yesterday, Tuesday, 21st of April, 249 confirmed cases among the UN worldwide, 30 at the Secretariat, and 53 total within the U.S. and very unfortunately, 3 fatalities within the UN system. Pamela Falk, any comment by the Secretary General on the Trump announcement on migration? No, we have no specific comment on the policy announced. And Abdelhamid wants to take the floor again, please, sir.
Thank you, Stephane. Again, if we notice that President Trump, in the beginning, he withdrew from the climate change agreement. He withdrew from UNESCO. He withdrew from Human Rights Council. He also stopped the financing of UNRWA, and now he is stopping the financing of WHO. Does that damage that caused by President Trump, could it be repairable? Do you think that his presidency would leave a legacy of destruction of international system?
Look, I'm not about to start analyzing legacies of leaders who remain in office. What I can tell you is that the United States remains a very important partner of the United Nations, and the Secretary General continues to work constructively with the U.S. side. Iftikhar Ali has a question. Apart from issuing public appeals, is the SG also in contact with world leaders on coronavirus and key internal questions? The Secretary General is spending quite a lot of time on the phone, focused on issues of public health, also very much focused on the issue of his global call for a ceasefire. And so he continues to speak to member states through their permanent representatives, foreign ministers, or heads of states. Okay, Florencia, do we have any more questions? Going once, going twice, and I can smell my lunch in the kitchen. So I will leave you all here. And thank you once again for tuning in.